Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video, we're going to have an in-depth look into the two new additions, or two of the new additions, with TU21 or Year 6 Season 1. You can go either way with it. And those two are Breaking Point and Brazen, the new shotgun talent. For Breaking Point, we're going to look at the crit chance, crit damage variant of it. We can also make a Headhunter variant with it. With some playing around, the Headhunter variant works out pretty well, but since PTS, they've actually altered the amount of damage on Breaking Point. So we'll have to look at it again, and also on Brazen, and they have made Brazen pretty powerful. For that, of course, I've prepared a spreadsheet. That will be linked down below as well, so you can look along with that if you want to, or just look at it and take your own conclusions from it. But otherwise, I'm going to try to explain best as I can what they all mean, and let's get started. And this is the spreadsheet we'll be basing the in-depth look around. It will be, of course, linked down below, so you can go and look at it for yourself. In here, we'll be discussing several variants of the crit chance, crit damage variant of Breaking Point as the new gear set. We won't be looking into the Headhunter variant. We'll do that in a future video. And then Brazen and versus other talents that are in its realm, basically. We'll make it a little bit bigger, and first off, actually, we'll go into the game and discuss the build that I'm basing the calculations off of. And that is having 4 pieces of Breaking Point, as we have here. And yeah, of course, Breakpoint is a game that came out in 2019, kind of a few months after Division. It had a lackluster release time, but they added a lot to it, so it turned out fine after a bunch of updates. Oh wait, no, this is Breaking Point, and of course, yeah, it's weird that they named it as close to that. But yeah, this Breakpoint is kind of the same. It's kind of lackluster now. They already made one update to it, which from the PTS, it was 2% weapon damage. So it was each shot granting 2% weapon handling, 2% weapon damage is now gone to 4% weapon damage. The weapon handling has stayed the same. So yeah, that's the first update. Breakpoint needed a bunch of updates before it was really accepted as a good game. Here, I feel this will need a few more updates as well. But to discuss the crit chance, crit damage variant, here we're just tagging on some crit chances and some crit damages. I'm trying to land on a decent-ish crit chance, crit damage, setting it up solo-wise to be like 59-146 here, no Coyote in there. And we're not taking the Coyote because this backpack talent especially is pretty mediocre, as we'll go into, even though they've upped it as well from 4 to 6%, also being an update from the PTS. It used to be going from 2% to 4%. Now it's from 4% to 6% to align with what they also did to the gear set itself. But that wasn't the big issue with it. The bigger issue was the uptime for it, because you would stack up with it. Once you're stacked up with the talent, you reload. That will trigger this bonuses to become active, and they're only active for 10 seconds afterwards. Now, to unload an weapon like this, even if you're going full pelt at 50 rounds, I'll die as well. This should be with the extended mag for this, because the mag count matters. If you're even going at 50 rounds and you want to unload all rounds with it, you're doing 7 rounds per second with this RPM, with 420 RPM. That means that you still take at least, 7 times 7, 49. So 7 seconds and then 1/7 of a second for that 50th round. That is if you're going full pelt, which with rifles, generally, well, you're first of all not hitting that unless you're macroing very specifically. Even then, it might not perfectly work out. And that means that you're firing for 7 seconds before you get a 10-second buff. That's then active for a mag, basically. And now you're back to being unbonused, because one of the bigger issues here is that no stacks are required while the bonuses are active. The timer running out will refill your magazine. You do get a refill after it, so there is that benefit. But yeah, no stacks are required where the bonuses are active. This means you can't stack for the next one while the buff is active. So it means that you're stacking up, you're using up the buff, and then you have a fresh magazine at the end of it that you then have to unload again, and then hit reload, and then you're active again. Meaning that the uptime on it is not great. It's basically, in my experience, especially in actually using it, in that 10 seconds, you might have the enemy just running away and hiding, or nobody being available to be shot. In certain situations, you could maybe get some real good use out of it. But in general play, doing control points, doing just activities, there are often times where just you don't have anything to shoot at for a few seconds just because everybody's in cover, everybody's just getting out from the spawns and stuff. And you have to be very cautious about when exactly you hit that reload. Let's go over to its numbers, but yeah, to explain before we go there, with a sacrifice and a gift, we're going for the sacrifice for that perfect glass. In this case, this beats Cheska Grupo in this setup, just because perfect glass is higher. We're going with a glass setup. If you were going to go with focus setup, Persine example, Cheska backpack. I'm okay with rifles, especially as a glass variant. I actually enjoy that setup. I would generally use already an ACS for that. So we're taking as well here ACS. You need actually one of the bigger mags for this. Classic M1As and stuff don't have the mag size to really effectively make use of this. You need to really go over at least 25 stacks consistently, and having a 50 round mag, getting 50% accuracy out of this is within the realm of reason. Even having a 40 round mag with a Mark 17 and getting 25 rounds out of this is also within the realm of reason. But yeah, you can't get 25 rounds out of a classic M1A, not even with some shenanigans or anything. And some of the other weapons, some other weapons can be used here as well, like the SIG or the MDR. Let's go into that spreadsheet that we prepared as I'll try to find the right scene. And here we have different variants of it. This is the variant that we have in the game as was, and at different stacks. So here we have it at 0 stacks, and what its output is in burst and sustain. And then we have the 25 hits variant, as we're adding just into real weapon damage. We're also receiving weapon handling. That is of note, as well as the bonus when it's active, especially that weapon handling part of it as well, alongside of the damage. When the buff is up, it does feel pretty good, both to shoot, and it feels pretty powerful. It does exceed high-end glass red at this point as well. That's why they gave it the buff, likely. But we see here at 25 stacks, we're bumping it up to basically 35% damage increase over the base. But of course, this has a 10-second uptime, and you have to be at this 7 million DPS, as we have that here as well, with 20% headshot. We have 60% DTA, but that only comes into play. That doesn't come into play with the breaking point set, but just with this high-end glass, as we'll look into it in a second. But at 25 hits, you're already over the 10 million mark for that 10 seconds. And for that 10 seconds, that feels pretty good. And you can consistently get a little bit more than this 25. Having looked a little bit back at footage that I was playing yesterday, I was consistently hitting between 25 and 35 stacks, depending on what enemy I was fighting. Sometimes also if there was a heavy or warhounds, I was even getting as high up as 40 rounds in actual gameplay, in just fighting enemies. And at that point, of course, at 50 stacks now, especially with it being 4% per stack, this is actually a nice number, and that's actually a nice DPS number. This is around the point where it is competing with basically a Striker Elmo fully stacked. That's around the same 13-ish mil. But of course, that one is just stacking up to that point, and it can do it pretty fast, and then it just holds it. It doesn't lose it after 10 seconds. That is the repeating issue with this one, as you'll have heard me repeating over and over again. It just doesn't keep the bonus long enough. With 50 stacks, with that ACRSS, we're reaching pretty decent numbers. Both the 30 million is pretty nice. We're getting 70% more than the base of it. And this is even with a grade 25 weapon, so we're already accounting for somewhat the worst case scenarios. I didn't do 26 because I haven't reached 26 yet on my main account, as I'm just doing it by actual playing, not just feeding resources into it only. I've fed some resources into it. Then here we have a high-end version of a rifle build, which is basically just the build that we had with 2 pieces of Providence, but then with a third piece of Providence and Coyote at 15 to 25 meters, and a Contractors and a Fox, the classic high-end glass that we used to run and love. Those end up around 9 million in this configuration. So yeah, with 20% headshot, this of course is dependent on this. That is 18% ahead of the base of Breaking Point. And then once Breaking Point gets going, it is actually ahead of it. At 25 hits there, it's already basically the amount that the high end is ahead of it. It's again ahead of it by around 17-ish%. This does mean that the build doesn't feel too bad, especially when the buff is up. It does feel pretty powerful. It's just, again, the uptime of that buff is, to me, especially having played it a bit now, it isn't consistent enough for it to displace this, because this just does this all the time except when it loses the gift. But that's not a thing as well, because this variant also has the gift, so it would lose it in the same ways. The weapon handling does make a big difference, making the ACRSS, especially just a laser, yeah, that kind of feels good for a little bit, and that little bit is again 10 seconds, as we keep on harping. But it is at this point at least a different way to do a glass, especially, or actually the talent doesn't really matter. If this was a focus variant, it would be basically the same values, because the talent, of course, is just on top of the rest. Or a spotter variant as the other options for rifles. Now, this number is at least now big enough that it can no longer be said that it's just a weaker than a high end. This would make for a different playstyle than a high end. And yeah, when it is going, and especially if you have the accuracy to pretty consistently be around that 30 or 35 mark with hits, it is good enough to use, definitely. If you already consider rifle builds in general to be worth it. Then we have a second set here, and we have it here with Sacrifice or Cheska with Coyote. Now, of course, if we want to put in the Coyote, as we'll go back into the game, if we want to put a Coyote in the slot, what that means is that, yeah, we need the 4-piece, and that means that we're bringing in the backpack. Now, this is mostly just to see how this backpack is in damage output, because, yeah, this 6% from each stack, that can, of course, add up pretty quickly. If we go back into here, except here, we're doing a new set of percentage compare. So, and then in this end piece, it is comparing to the numbers that we have for with the backpack being vigilance. So first off as well, we have two options, because we can either go here with the Sacrifice, having 5% more on the glass, or having Cheska having 10% crit chance. Now, of course, the headshot, we're already kind of counting just by lowering it a little bit, by having not it be the full 15% basically, or the 15 stat from Providence. We're accounting for around a 20% headshot rate, which is, with rifles, actually, I would say is a little bit higher. With ARs, I find myself in certain situations, especially going pretty close range, and then you get this 20%. We'll still keep it at this 20%, even though I would say with rifles, I might be much more inclined to say this is closer to 15 or maybe even 10, just because you tend to be at longer ranges. Then the Sacrifice versus Coyote, the Sacrifice actually loses out to the Cheska plus Coyote, I should say, by a tiny margin across the board. One thing that does affect this, of course, is how much this is affecting it. So if we take this down to 0 to headshot rate, even at that point, or at that point especially, the Cheska is way larger ahead. If we make this 100% and we're benefiting a little bit more from the sacrifices buff, then it is ahead. So if you were to calculate this with just the headshot stat in there as full, the sacrifice looks to be ahead. And this is kind of why we use this number. You kind of need to approximate here a somewhat reasonable number. Might actually even put this at 15%, but in general play, anything that is in lower rates of fire here, or in lower rates of headshot here, will make the Cheska variant win, the Cheska plus Coyote. Because yeah, it is a crit chance, crit damage build. When we're using the 2-piece, and going with the Providence, that's not that big of an issue. The sacrifice definitely beats out the a Cheska Grupo setup. But here, of course, just Cheska. Although, of course, you could have sacrifice plus Cheska as well. It's just that 10% bonus needs, that 10% crit chance bonus kind of needs to be in there. Then what we have is that at 50 stacks, in the same way, so we're comparing here this 0 stacks to this 0 stacks, these 25 stacks against this 25 stacks. So between them, the number actually rises a lot more. Of course it does, just because the bonus is we're not having that Vigi to help with the initial numbers, making this initial number pretty low. This, when the buff isn't active, this 6 million is really bad. This 7 million kind of still feels okay. This 6 million feels really bad. And then it goes up to 12.9-ish there for the Coyote variant, or for the Cheska variant with Coyote. So here, comparing it at 50 stacks, if we were to hit 50 stacks consistently, because at 25 stacks, it is still pretty far behind, of course, because it is dependent on how many of the stacks. At 100 stacks, you could think that this would be worth it, but it's definitely not, of course. And that's, again, the uptime. The Vigilance is applying that bonus as well to when the buff isn't active. The backpack is just not going to be worth it, just because also, again, the uptime of that of the talent is not good enough to just rely on it, unless you're doing something very specific to get it going with that amount of hits. And then you're using it, let's say maybe raid bosses or something. But again, this DPS compared to, especially for instance, a chest striker, which is doing like 16 million in the same setup, especially with Oreo, those are different numbers. This is not reaching those points. But overall, if we go back into the game and put this back to this backpack and take back the mask, it isn't bad. It is basically a B tier. It is on par with, on the PvE end especially, on par with something like Umbra. You can run it just to run something else, because trying to get the most out of this build means trying to adapt when you're reloading. You don't reload after every kill. Basically, you try to maximize your fights and try to be in positions where you can both fill up quickly and then also be in a position where then once the buff is active, that you also have targets to shoot at. So it does affect your playstyle to try to maximize for this build, and that is it is enough for some interest. But yeah, it is definitely not a meta build. It is definitely not an on-top build. It is, especially as well, rifles already are not the most used weapon to begin with. It is okay, and it will find some use, but actually I will likely use it as I already actually will add in likely to the build collection, is a version with Headhunter that works really well. But there we're just using the magazine, the reload mechanic that the set has when you swap weapons. So we're giving up all these bonus damages and stuff and all of those things, and just using it as a reload mechanic. That feels kind of like a little bit of a waste. It's mostly that it just doesn't get in the way of Headhunter more than that it is a true great Headhunter build. It's just, it has a mechanic that Headhunter can benefit from, which is to reload things like 1886 or an Diamondback, as I was looking for that word. About to call it Agonizing Bite, as I've dissented way too much. Let's move on to Brazen. And here we are with the second part of the same spreadsheet. It's in that same link. And that is Brazen as it has come into the game. Let's actually go look at it in the game first, as here we have a normal variant, as you will have to add to your library or find a weapon with it, and then you can, of course, add it in onto your weapons. And this is, receive 3% amplified damage on the next shot with the weapon for each pellet that hits the target, if at least 6 pellets hit. So this if at least 6 pellet hits is a requirement, and then we get per pellet hit at 3% up to, of course, all of the shotguns, just to make that clear, all of the shotguns in Division 2 have 8 pellets in them. So you have a maximum of 8 times 4, 24%. With the normal variant, it is 6 pellets hit. If we go look at the perfect variant, Perfect Brazen, which is on light glue, which is a Super 90, or on Torn, which is a SPAS 12. The Super 90 is a much more usable weapon than the SPAS 12, also just having mod slots as the SPAS 12 only has a magazine slot, so you're giving up some crit chance with it, and it's generally considered not worth it. The Super 90, though, can be definitely used, and the thing with it is then at this is if at least 4 pellets hit. So now we're going the requirement-wise much easier. But then also it has this text at the end. Killing an enemy will provide a plus 8% amplified damage on the next shot. So this reads really weird because it reads as if it's on top. So you would get, if you're killing them and you're hitting all 8 pellets, you would get 24% from that and then plus 8. That's actually how it reads, right? That's not the case. Also, you don't get an 8% if you kill with it. What you do get is how it worked on the PTS. And this text at the end of it is basically meaningless and should be left out because it's also working that way with the normal variant. So the way that it works is if you're hitting all 8 pellets, as we did do there, even though the enemy died, the pellet's connected, it will count it as that much. If you if I set this, for instance, to having a named, which will not die right away, which I should have done, is if I miss as well, if you just completely miss, you don't get to retain. It does lose it, so it's for the next shot, as it says. If we hit the full 8, we get the full 8. If we kind of just half hit, although we're gonna kill him here, so let's get a fresh one. If I empty this out as well, just so we don't have it there. We're gonna half hit. I hit 2 pellets there according to the game, and I didn't get a buff. But one thing you may already notice is whenever I'm killing, even though I was kind of on the same angle, and I'm definitely not hitting all 4 pellets there, we're getting a full buff. And this is the non-perfect Brazen, so that's still working like that. As long as you're getting the kill, you're getting a full 8 stack, as if you got a full 8 stack, and that is both on the normal and on the perfect. It seems to be that the text on the perfect variant, it's saying this. Killing an enemy will provide plus 8% amplified damage on the next shot. This should read as plus 24 damage, and then it kind of makes sense because it is a full stack and it does work as 24%, as we've tested in a second with the spreadsheets. But yeah, as long as you're getting a kill. Now, of course, if we think about shotguns and we think about one-shot kills, and we go like, what build kind of does that? All of the headhunters, of course. A shotgun headhunter with Brazen is pretty powerful. You can also even, what you can do is stack it up here. And one of the things is it retains it. So here, normally, if, let's say with a lot of talents, if we swap over to a pistol or something else, or for instance with Determined, if you swap between weapons, you lose the talent. Here, I had a full 8 stack. If I go back to that shotgun, I still have that full 8 stack. So you can even prep it in the range, even if you would want to. But if in the field, just you prep it on an enemy. On a Regulus build, for instance, you just swap to your Regulus, you do your thing. Oh, you need to crack a helmet, you bring it back out. You have a plus 24% at the ready, at the start of it, which, makes quite the difference. This will mean that this Brazen will overtake basically every other talent, especially for Headhunter builds, but also in general damage builds, just having the ability to, as a lot of the talents we generally use for shotguns are on kill, which this isn't. This is if I'm starting from fresh, the first shot isn't bonus, and then the second shot onward is going to be at least a little bit bonus, depending on if I hit 6 pellets or more. You should be sticking your weapon kind of into enemies. That's what shotguns are for, and just making sure that basically all the pellets hit. Now, that is one reason to at least consider the light glue, because if you're using it, for instance, in a setting with, let's say, PFE, I would use sometimes shotguns with PFEs. I would much rather have this light glue, because much more consistently will I get against rogues, especially where I'm not getting a kill shot really quickly. This 4 pellets, giving already an 12% at the very least, if it's active. But then I just need to hit 4 pellets of it. Hitting 6 pellets consistently drops it down a lot if you're just using it regularly. But of course, if you're just going for using that kill mechanic of it, yeah, then it's basically uptime. It is basically always up. And for Headhunters, this is generally just a 24% more damage than you had before, consistently. But all of these, of course, as I likely still will do, is, for instance, this is a shotgun build, as we used for one of the, or is part of my collection, and we also already did the build showcase on. This generally runs a Scorpio, and this will not displace a Scorpio. It is a good damage talent to maybe have alongside of it. It will also become the main damage talent that I will choose for some of these things, especially for its damage. But yeah, Scorpio's ability to just do CC alongside of damage, and it does good enough damage, especially now that it can have a Detox as a third stat. And then alongside of that, having this, if an enemy is really strong and gets to 7 shots, then you have a 20% amp on this, which makes some of the harder to kill things a little bit easier to kill after you get the 7 shots on them. But overall, most things will die, and then the poison and the disorient and the shock will help you get to killing them, because they're, whatever you're shooting at least is kind of incapacitated. Yeah, let's go towards the numbers. One of the things they did do as well is take it from a 1%, and that's kind of weird to me, as yeah, they took it from a 1% to 3% per pellet. It went from being, it's okay, I'm likely going to use it, and they skipped the 2%, which would be, oh, this is actually really good, to 3%, which is, yeah, it is one of those. So they jumped the shark, and the shark was number 2. 2% would have been perfectly fine with this. 1% already, as I said in the PTS thoughts, didn't make this look too horrible, just because also it had those mechanics. It had the mechanic of on kill, you get a full stack, and you get to retain by weapon swap, which none of the other talents here will do. Recommending it here to having no damage talent, or for instance having a utility damage or utility talent, basically, because it could have preservation or something on it. But yeah, that would not increase your damage. Here we have Brazen at 4, 6, and 8 stacks, or 8 pellets hit. And compared to no talents, especially, we're going up, yeah, 12%, 18%, 24%. This is just a pure amp. I have checked this, of course, on the range, and we've even have altered even this part, where normally it would spit out a number. With shotguns, you need to divide it by 8. When you're doing a calculation, you just have to take it back to pellets, basically, as the weapon damage stated and the base damage of a shotgun is based on 8 pellets. And yeah, these numbers match up, so we know it is an amp. We can say that with some confidence now. And compared to Close and Personal and Pummel, which are 2 talents that quite often get picked for it, on a full red build, this needs to be said as well, on a full red build, because if we alter the amount of red or blue cores, of course, the weapon damage catches up a little bit. And one of the things on these is as well, they are both on kill talents. So Close and Personal, on a full red, it is giving another 12%, 12.25%, on both burst and sustain. And this is also with grade 25, so the kind of the worst case scenario for them. But compared to that, basically the minimal amount of Brazen will overtake that. Then on against Pummel, Pummel then needs 2 or 3 kills depending on which variant you're using. Here it would be 3 kills, because actually the weapon I'm using to compare it with all of them is Super 90s, different variants, but they're all the same except minor variations in stability and accuracy. And they Pummel will give more than, of course, than Close and Personal, which just needs 1 kill. But then after those 3 kills, you do get a pretty decent bump in your damage. It is equivalent to that 6 pellet hit of a Brazen. But of course, what Pummel still then does is also reload your shotgun. So there is the value there. So if you are using it kind of as a main, you can go with Pummel still. But it is basically, to me, Close and Personal is kind of out of the picture. Brazen is going to be much more consistent as well, just because you can have it from the second shot onwards, basically, or you can even prep it beforehand. But Close Close and Personal is basically out unless you're basically full blue. But even then, if you're full blue, you're not really getting the kills. You're killing pretty slowly. Sounds much more as a PvP maybe setup. And then as well, again, Brazen would be much more the pick, because by the time you get the kill, you've gotten the kill. The fight's over, most likely. At least if it's 1v1s. Pummel still in PvE settings can be pretty valuable just for that reload, because of course the reload on this thing is horrendous on the Super 90. We could do as well is take fast stands, as actually fast stands currently still as well works with per pellet, and did so since the last season. And you can get the reload down quite a bit. Of course, that doesn't add in anything to the burst damage of a weapon. Burst is just damage times RPM, RPS technically. But it does pick up the sustain of it and takes the sustain much higher than any of the other ones. And of course, more so than that even is that it gives you agency. You're not reloading for as long, meaning that you can get shooting again, you can stagger enemies again, you can hit a weak point and save yourself, or just kill whatever is in front of you. Then we have Flatline here with Technician. So with the other ones, we're keeping their numbers without the shield of the Striker shield with Firewall. Here we are actually adding in Flatline and also going Technician. So it's a little bit unfair in this way, because we're considering the bonus basically from Technician having that underbarrel, where all of these other ones actually could have the shield for the Striker shield up, having 11 or 12% amp on top of this number. This is why also Flatline, to me, the argument that Flatline was a better Brazen never was a thing. While Technician as well gives you a shield, so you could have a little bit of a stronger just normal shield, Crusader shield. The Striker shield and shotguns fit together so well, together with basically all of the other bonuses from Firewall, that going Flatline is actually a big ask. It was never actually that good, because you have to, of course, give a 5 crit chance. You have to rearrange your build kind of to then make up for that. It was landing on 110%. Basically, that 15% is it is a 15% talent, but you need to make compromises to reach that point. And then all of these other builds could have a Striker shield on top of it. But Flatline would have very good uptime, because you could have technically perfect uptime. Sometimes the ADSing doesn't always pulse the enemy. But Brazen at 3% is exceptionally strong. It is going to be my pick for a lot of shotgun builds. On PFEs, I'm going to likely use the light glue just so I have don't have to hit 6 pellets. On all of my headhunters, I'm going to replace the shotgun, because what I use the shotguns on those is I'm generally using a Regulus or a marksman rifle. If I have a shotgun in there, that's generally just to crack the helmets on heavies, or just kill warhounds in one go by shooting them in the legs. Brazen fits that much better than the Pummel that I have on them now, because I generally don't run the shotgun as the main. and Brazen will then overtake that by a lot. And I think actually they overtuned it, going from 1 to 3%. And the thing is, it's not per se overpowered in a general sense, because shotguns just aren't that widely used. The Scorpio as well is in that category, and the Scorpio has other things than damage that are very valuable. So yeah, this will be in some builds, especially I had Regulus builds that are running shotguns alongside of them, and for me personally as well, any PFE build also, or PFE builds where I use shotguns. Then as well, on for instance, shotgun based Hunter's Fury, I might take a Scorpio and then take this alongside of it. If I need the Scorpio, I can always swap to it for the bigger enemies. If I'm just fighting reds, I'm going to have basically a one-shot on every red that I come across, especially with a build like this that is set up all red. Any red enemy in front of me is just a one-shot, and I get full stacks out of it, and then I just go to the next enemy, and then I'll just reload in between. I'll just do the reload myself instead of having pummel. So yeah, that's Brazen for us for now. Let's go to a conclusion. And to conclude this video, Breaking Point is overall a subpar set, especially in crit chance, crit damage setup. You can think of it as an Umbra or an X0, better sets than it exists, and that's mostly the issue for it. Damage-wise, on crit chance, crit damage variants, it doesn't work out, and it's not so much the damage, it's much more the uptime of the buff after you've used it, and also not being to restack it while the buff is going. I would have much more liked that you could stack it while you already had the buff up, so you could basically work a little bit on a somewhat buff and then reload, have that buff up, and then while that buff is up, you can maybe work on a much stronger buff, because also you have the weapon handling to land more shots. And you could kind of just cascade up to having more and more damage. That isn't the case. They added just more damage to it. In the end, situationally, you could make this work. You might actually enjoy running it around with it in a crit chance, crit damage variant, just as a different variant if you like rifle builds already to begin with. But to me, I wouldn't take it over an... if it is in a glass variant, over a glass high end, if it's in a focus variant, over just a focus high end, just because they have much more consistency. Now, one thing I am going to use it for, and this is also likely going to make it into the build collection, as I've already actually made the build, is, and actually even is in a slot already, just not on the collection yet. I want to play around a little bit with it and find the right way, as also likely it will become with a Overlord backpack, as that is what I'm farming at the current time for it. Is a setup with Headhunter, with headshots, and just in this case as well with the Diamondback with its buffs now, especially this 8 magazine size, and now that its damage is the same. I feel that works out pretty well, and in there with the reload mechanic where you just weapon swap and this weapon reloads, that is a mechanic good enough that Headhunter does the rest, basically, at that point. So we're then basically only using this, not for its damage at all and such. We're just avoiding all that, and just the reload on swap becomes the thing that we use it for. Which is kind of a little bit of sad thing, of course. We're not using the set to its fullest. We're basically also never reloading and actually getting this buff, because ain't nobody got time for that. But this build will definitely make it in the collection, and this build also will have an in-depth look into it, together with having a look at what Breaking a Point does for Ninja Bike headshot builds, because yeah, there's one more good bonus available for them. So let's see how that does. I don't have high expectations, but it should be better than the old version, which wasn't too great to begin with. And yeah, then we have, of course, Brazen, and yeah, Brazen is going to make it onto a lot of shotguns of mine, I feel. For instance, as well, this Headhunter is going to be changed, and yeah, these pummels, they're all going to get turned into Brazens, which is going to be at the end of it, of course. As mostly because, yeah, you can retain. That is a very important difference. You can keep the buff going. And especially if you're, for instance, with these, I'm not maining these shotguns. I'm just pulling them out. The Regulus is the main weapon. And then I'm just pulling them out at points to get a crack ahead with it or something like that. I might keep one with Pummel, one with Brazen. That might actually be a thing. Maybe the Detox one, because I have a Detox and a Health one, which is kind of like a speedrunner setup. Not that I actually use them in that way. But I might actually make the Health one with Brazen for popping helmets off, and then have the Detox one maybe still stay pummeled in case I just want to main the shotgun. Because that's the thing. It's now basically between Brazen and Pummel, and then Fast Stands as an option on some. I feel it's between those three now, for especially the burst and sustain side. On the utility end, you could, of course, still go Preservation or Future Perfect for different things. But yeah, Brazen is definitely one of the good talents now, and it's maybe even a little bit too good with a 3% amplified. Will definitely, for instance, when Reanimated comes around, I might actually run around with a Headhunter's Fury much more so than I would with anything else, because aiming anything towards the head, and as long as I get the kill, I get Brazen again. And if a pellet hits the head, it would Reanimated. Yeah, they're dead anyway. So, and this will make it much more consistent for that. And yeah, it is weird that they added even more wrong text with the perfect one. So yeah, if you found this interesting and or learned something from it or enjoyed it in some way, if you are willing, please help out by doing any of the algorithm stuffs down below. My next video is likely going to be on some of the wrong text, which yeah, will include Brazen then again, the perfect Brazen, as we'll go for no particular reason over some of the wrong text that exist in the game, as I've collated a list of them together as we'll have a look around. And afterwards, we'll also have a look at the Hunter Fury variant of Breaking Point. This will likely be the next build showcase, although that's likely a few days away, at the very least a week away, I think. Yeah, we'll continue as well on with looking at this build as well in an in-depth look separately, likely before the build showcase, which would make more sense. So yeah, I hope you join me for those, and as always, have a good night.